Several months ago, my friend Brian Ballard was invited to give the inaugural PRECÍS Lecture in philosophy of religion at Princeton University. PRECÍS stands for Philosophy, Religion, and Existential Commitment in Society. He asked if I'd like to post the lecture on my channel, and I said, sure, so here it is.
The philosopher Immanuel Kant wrote that the three most important questions in life are, what can I know, what should I do, and what may I hope? Now, those first two are sort of the darlings of philosophers. They've gotten a lot of attention, but I think the third is unjustly neglected. The Trappist monk Thomas Merton wrote, "You are made in the image of what you desire." Well, hope is a variation on desire, and in that sense, you're made in the image of what you hope as well. And so to ask, what may I hope, is in a way to ask, who may I become? I think we're a bit ambivalent about hope. This is a painting that was very famous in its day by the symbolist George Frederick Watts. It's called Hope. Why is she sitting on a globe? Why are her eyes bandaged? Why eyes rather than her mouth or her ears? What is she doing contorting her body in this way? We get a clue from the artist himself. He writes the idea a year earlier to a friend of his. He says, "Hope sitting on a globe with bandaged eyes, playing on a lyre which has all the strings broken but one, out of which, poor little tinkle, she is trying to get all the music possible, listening with all her might to the little sound." Do you like the idea? That's what we're looking at there. So is that what hope is like? Is hope what we do when, though our eyes have been destroyed, we listen for the music with all our might? Some in Watts' day thought that this was a companion painting with an earlier painting called Mammon. And they thought that the girl in the Hope painting, with her eyes bandaged, is the same girl beneath the hand of this monster here on his throne. It is true that hope often needs to be liberated from the dominion of a dark power. It's in the face of evil that hope can be both most urgent and most difficult. I'd like to share with you a letter. This was written by a man who was sailing home after being away for many years. He was eager to see his children. The closer we get to home, the greater our impatience to hear from our loved ones. Everything that's happened the past few years, all our possessions are gone. There won't be a pin left. The Germans stole everything. Not a photo, letter, or document remains. Financially, we were fine in the past few years. I earned good money and saved it. Now it's all gone. But I don't think about any of that. We have lived through too much to worry about that kind of thing. Only the children matter, the children. I hope to get news from you immediately. Maybe you've already heard news about the girls. Letters from Otto Frank. It's May 15th, 1945. He had just left Auschwitz, which was only recently liberated, where he survived his time in the concentration camp. The girls he refers to are, of course, his daughters, and one of them is known to us, Anne Frank, through her diary. It would take Otto 2 months. This is not the age of social media, so it took a couple of months before he even discovered what happened to Anne. And she had perished in a different camp, Bergen-Belsen, of typhus. When he learned that news, he locked himself in his office and wept and wept and wept. And his friend, the same friend who had sheltered them for years from the Nazis, also managed to save her diary, and she put it in front of him on his desk and said, "Here is your daughter's legacy." What may Otto hope when he learns that his daughter has been killed? There he is walking with Anne. I read you the last entry in that diary. It's probably the last thing that Anne ever wrote. She says, and mind you, she's been hiding for 2 years at this point, "When everybody starts hovering over me, I get cross, then sad, and finally end up turning my heart inside out, the bad part on the outside and the good part on the inside, and keep trying to find a way to become what I'd like to be, and what I could be if only there were no other people in the world." That was August 1st, 1944. The Nazis took them on August 4th. And she died in Bergen-Belsen, probably in March of 45. The camp was liberated in April. So what may Anne hope when the Nazis come storming in? What may she hope when she feels the sickness taking her in Bergen-Belsen? The Holocaust, I think, is unique in the world's evils, but parents losing children is hardly unique, alas. I mean, it's 100,000 years Homo sapiens has existed. Just think how many mothers and fathers and how many famines have held their children and watched the hunger take them. How many have been able to say with Ben Jonson, "Farewell, thou child of my right hand, and joy." That would be a dreadful number to know. Many of those parents lost their children in wars, and as today is Veterans Day, it's only fitting that we remember survivors of wars, preeminent among the world's sufferers. Here's a painting from George Clausen. This is youth mourning. That is his daughter grieving the death of her fiancé from a battle in World War I. And this is the time when we are learning about shell shock, which we would know today to be post-traumatic stress. About the survivors of World War I, Stanley Kunitz would write, "What have we done to them that what they are shrinks from the touch of what they hope to be?" That, of course, describes a great many sufferers, doesn't it? And yet, beyond these specific evils, many of us have a more of a vague sense of being overwhelmed by the state of the world, that something is wrong that just can't be put right, even if we can't quite put our finger on it. Maybe it's our sense that things are running down, that the environment is slowly degrading, that the earth cannot be our home forever. Cormac McCarthy captures this feeling, this overwhelming sense of things being off in his post-apocalyptic novel, The Road. McCarthy writes, "Once there were brook trout in the streams and the mountains. You could see them standing in the amber current, where the white edges of their fins wimpled softly in the flow. They smelled of moss in your hand, polished and muscular and torsional. On their backs were vermiculate patterns that were maps of the world and its becoming. Maps and mazes, of a thing which could not be put back, not be made right again. In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery." And so Kant's question returns to us. In the face of overwhelming evil, what may we hope? Many ages passed, and many people today still would give a supernatural answer to this question. They would say that what we may hope for is a God who will set things right in some kind of afterlife, in a heaven. This is The Plains of Heaven by the English landscape painter John Martin. Now, I grant readily that some theistic visions of the afterlife are not so hope-worthy. Some theists think many, perhaps even most people who have ever lived will be raised from the dead and punished everlastingly. Should you hope that this is going to happen? Well, it doesn't sound very hope-worthy to me, but a theist isn't stuck with this kind of grim eschatological vision. After all, if you're a theist, you can think God is exceedingly good. He wants to save everyone. God's pretty good at stuff. Got a lot of resources and time. He's probably going to succeed. Indeed, within Christianity, for instance, there is an ancient and venerable tradition of universalism. This is the view that God exists and that he will, in the fullness of time, succeed in saving all persons. Okay, so you'll find this in figures like Gregory of Nyssa, one of the great theologians of the early church. Gregory thought that there was a hell, a kind of punishment in the afterlife, but the punishment was finite and it was aimed at correction in the way that a parent punishes a child. It was meant to bring the child back into the fold. And Gregory thought, in the fullness of time, God will succeed in every case. All right, if you want to read more about that, Thomas Talbot's book is one of the best around. But of course, you don't have to be a Christian to believe that there's a God who's going to save everyone. So we can consider here a more generic type of universalist theism. And on this view, God exists and ultimately succeeds in redeeming every person. So this is universalist theism. All right. Now, to talk about redeeming, this is sort of like smacks of theological language. All I mean by that is this. That someone is redeemed only if that person reaches moral maturity, leads a life that is on balance exceedingly good for him and others, and enters into friendship with God. Okay, so this is a set of necessary conditions. You're redeemed only if these things all happen. Maybe there are other conditions that need to be in place as well, but I mean at least this much. Okay, that being said, what am I trying to say here? Here's what I'm trying to say. I want to advance two claims. One is a modest claim. On balance, hoping in universalist theism is at least permissible. You can be gripped by this hope and still be someone who is morally and intellectually respectable. I offer you as well the immodest claim. On balance, hoping in universalist theism is not only permissible, it is positively admirable. Our reasons for being gripped by this hope are weighty indeed. Now, someone who advances the immodest claim might want to go on and advance what we may call the needlessly aggressive claim. If you are not gripped by the hope of universalist theism, a bit of soul-searching might be in order. I think tonight there's no need for this kind of aggression. We'll settle for some immodesty. All right. You don't have to hope in the face of evil. There are other strategies available to you, like renunciation. What I mean is you could renounce your cares, your loves, your concerns. You could studiously cultivate an indifference to the suffering of others. Is this a tempting option? Crude readings of ancient wisdom traditions like Stoicism and Buddhism would make it sound like that's what they're recommending. I doubt that very much, that really is what these traditions want you to do. I mean, after all, that strategy is just a dreadful one, as if the answer to the world's problems were to become someone who's capable of reading a Holocaust memoir and not being bothered by it. This does not sound like a particularly admirable path to take. Furthermore, it would empty your life of meaning. If you withdraw your love from the things in the world, that means you're withdrawing your love from your friends as well. I mean, if you don't love your friends, you don't really have a friendship. Would you like to live your life without friendship? To withdraw your love from the world is to empty your life of most, maybe all, the things that give it meaning. And anyways, it doesn't even make sense. You must love at least one person, the person you're trying to protect, you. But evil will come for you as well. We mustn't speak of suffering as though the sufferers were out there. They are, of course, in here as well. C.S. Lewis puts the point well. He writes, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable." Or, if I may quote Kunitz once more, "In a murderous time, the heart breaks and lives by breaking." It comes to the same thing. So renouncing our loves, this is going to work as a way of responding to evil. We've got to care, we've got to love. We've got to open ourselves up to the wounding that this love makes possible. But that leaves us only with three options: hope, despair, and ignorance. Ignorance, you can ignore, turn a blind eye to the evils of the world. Or you can look at them and be crushed by despair. These are not particularly tempting options, are they? I like how Bernard Williams put it. He said the key is to be able to see the truth and not be broken by it. But ignorance would have you fail to see the truth, and despair would have you be broken by it. I say hope. Hope is the way to see the truth and not be broken by it. As Shakespeare wrote, hope is a lover's staff. Those of us who love can walk with hope. All right, and then in that case, the question comes to us again: what may we hope? Particularly in the face of evil, what may we hope? Let's talk a bit about what hope is. I mean, we're carrying on about hope. What even is this? Because if we're asking for what may we hope, we got to understand the kind of thing we're wondering we may or may not have. There are a lot of philosophers working on hope today, and pretty much everyone agrees that the following two are at least minimum conditions on hope. Okay, so to hope for something means thinking it at least might be true. So you can't hope that 2 + 2 = 5, for example. And desiring that thing, or somehow thinking of it as good. That's why you don't hope that the polar ice caps will continue to melt, right? Because this is not a good thing. You don't hope that terrorism will continue well into the 21st century, or do you? I mean, this is the stuff of supervillains, okay? So notice, though, that these necessary conditions are not sufficient. A person could have this profile and be in despair. This is exactly what a despairing person also thinks. They think, oh, it might be true, but boy, it's unlikely, and I sure wish it were true. Despair. So the question is, what do we need to add to hope to get hope? Sorry, to these conditions to get hope. Our very own Andrew Chignell, I think, gives us an exceedingly plausible answer in the focus theory of hope. Andrew writes, in addition to the cognitive and cognitive elements, hope involves the disposition to focus on a desired outcome as one whose possibility is psychologically unswamped by the salience of countervailing considerations. We're talking here about a kind of attentional phenomenon, I think. The hopeful person is disposed to experience the hoped-for prospect as something that really might happen, rather than focusing on the odds that are stacked against it. Okay, so let's add this condition, that hoping requires that you focus on P's possibility rather than the odds against it, okay? This is how I'm going to think about hope from here on out. And now we can ask for what we may hope. We're going to need to know what things at least might be true, what things would be good or desirable, and what things does it make sense for us to focus on as possibilities? That's what we're asking here. Some people might hope for a better world in the here and now, that science, progress, technology will continue to improve life here on Earth. Certainly, we've reaped many benefits from these things. Our preeminent utopian philosopher is Nick Bostrom over at Oxford. And Bostrom writes, "Utopia is the hope that the scattered fragments of our good that we come across from time to time in our lives can be put together one day to reveal the shape of a new kind of life, the kind of life that yours should have been." All right, all of this sounds really nice for the utopians. Notice that the kind of life yours should have been is not the kind of life yours actually is going to be. I mean, if you're hoping in utopia, the odds are good that you're hoping in a world that doesn't include you. It certainly doesn't include Anne Frank. Utopia is not a place where Otto is reunited with Anne, where parents and children who've been sundered apart get to see each other again. Why? Because even if utopians somehow had the power of reanimating corpses, the corpses aren't there anymore. Many people in the Holocaust were burned. Their ashes have been scattered. I mean, it's been 100,000 years of suffering human beings on the earth. Their bodies are completely decomposed. There is just no way to gather the stray atoms, as it were. We don't even know their names, their whereabouts, their lives. The information is just not there. The sea will not give up her dead unless we know where the dead are, and we don't. There's not even the evidence to get the information. That's why some kind of resurrection is not even going to be possible for a future superintelligence or an omnicompetent technocrat in some glittering utopian city. All right. This is a problem. Why? Because it matters that people died in the Holocaust. And so the fact that we can't make it right for them matters. In The Lord of the Rings, Samwise Gamgee, once Sauron, the bad guy, has been defeated, he asks Gandalf, "Are all the sad things coming untrue?" If Gandalf were a utopian, he would say, "I'm afraid not, Sam. Many of the saddest things will remain true forever." I think it's a good idea to keep trying to make things better. Hey, let's try to set up as good a society as we can. I'll join you in that cause. The question, I think, is, may we hope for more? May we hope for some future in which things have been set right for Anne, where Otto gets to hold his little girl again? This, of course, would require an afterlife. I mean, if Anne remains dead, then this isn't going to happen for her. I mean, certainly some good things have happened for Anne since she has died, like her diary being circulated, her becoming a beacon of hope for people. I think this makes her life go significantly better than it would otherwise. But of course, still remains a robust sense in which things have not been set right for her, and that's not to mention the countless other Holocaust victims whose diaries we do not have, whose names we do not even remember. Okay. In the greatest English poem since Paradise Lost, we hear this hope voiced, an expansive hope of redemption for all. Tennyson writes, "Oh, yet we trust that somehow good will be the final end of ill, to pangs of nature, sins of will, defects of doubt, and taints of blood. That nothing walks with aimless feet, that not one life shall be destroyed or cast as rubbish to the void when God hath made the pile complete. That not a worm is cloven in vain, that not a moth with vain desire is shriveled in a fruitless fire, but subserves another's gain. Behold, we know not anything. I can but trust that good shall fall at last, far off at last to all, and every winter change to spring. So runs my dream, but what am I? An infant crying in the night, an infant crying for the light, and with no language but a cry." That's Tennyson. Look at that hipster. Tennyson here voices an utterly expansive hope for the redemption of not only all persons, but all animals, creatures as lowly as the moth and the worm. Can it make sense for us to join Tennyson in that hope? Notice one thing. He cherishes this hope without thinking with any great confidence it's going to pass. He's aware that he doesn't know, but he hopes. Some people are rather down on the idea of heaven. They think it's some kind of boring situation where it's like this guy, he wishes he brought a magazine. Like you're going to be some kind of disembodied harpist singing to God forever. I don't want that either. The question is not, can we imagine a heaven we wouldn't want? The question is, Can we imagine one that we would? There's another question. If we can't, so what? Can't there be a good heaven we can't imagine? Set that to one side for a minute. Because I'm going to offer you a picture that I think sounds pretty darn good. I invite you to share my judgment. I do have a method here. Now, if you're a scientist, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this man has no method. But I swear I do. This is the method. Look within and ask yourself, what are the things that I long for? My deepest longing. And the things upon reflection that I would endorse as legitimate and wholesome longings. And consider that if there were a God, those longings might give you some clue of the kind of life that you were meant to have. And so let us project that life from those longings. Okay, when I do that, this is the wish list that I come up with, all right? A renewed earth. Okay, so just to be clear, we're not talking about a disembodied existence. I mean, in the Christian tradition, orthodoxy is bodily resurrection, okay? But of course, that's open to other theists as well. Well, if you have a body, you need somewhere to walk around, don't you? I mean, bodily resurrection, but no earth, that would be an interesting sort of life. The classical Christian vision is for the renewal of all things, of all creation. And it's open to any theist, I think, to think about it in these terms. Well, maybe not to any theist, but theists in general. So I'm talking about a renewed earth where ecological devastation has been undone, where the beaches have been cleaned, as it were. Okay, that sounds pretty good. How about harmony among the beasts? This sounds exceedingly fanciful. If there are any biologists in the room, what I'm inviting you to imagine is a world where there isn't predation, for example, where foxes are not plucking baby ducklings from their nest, and so on. Okay, if there's a God, is it so crazy to think a natural order like that could be established? Fellowship with the beast. I think many of us long for deep relationships with animals of a variety of kinds. And this is very difficult to come by. I mean, I have all my life longed to own a horse. I don't know that I ever will get to. But you might understand what I'm getting at here if you have a dog, or if you don't have a dog. I think it's plausible to think that these are relationships with animals that we are meant to have, and that in heaven that longing can be fulfilled, okay? Fellowship with lost loved ones, enough said about that. Fellowship with all saints. If everyone is saved, that means you get to be friends with anyone in history. It's a rather frightening prospect if you think about a character like Genghis Khan, but you got to remember, he's redeemed, okay? He's not so bad when he's redeemed. Fellowship with yourself. After all, you're alienated not only from others, but the person sitting in your chair. Moral redemption, glorified bodies, and what I mean by that is bodies that don't get sick and decay, to be able to run without growing weary. Fellowship with God, the most interesting person you've ever met. And the fruition of our projects, at least many things that you've begun in this life, of course not the evil projects, but many things that you've begun in this life, you will not have time to finish them, or you will not be able to finish them in the way that you long to. Perhaps heaven is a place where you can take those projects up again. Limitless time to create, to begin new projects. Limitless time to realize our potential. Many of you in this room have dozens of gifts that you have to let wither because you can only cultivate a few of them in a lifetime. Maybe those other gifts that you wish you had the time to cultivate give you some clue about the kind of person you were actually meant to become. Limitless time to know each other. A little more time with your friends, would that be okay? Limitless time to become like God. A journey, something like a journey into the depths of God. And let me say it this way, the spirit of youth and the wisdom of age. Isn't it sort of cool about life that when you have the energy to do things, you don't have the wisdom to do the right things. And by the time you finally get a little wisdom, you're too tired to do the things that you now know matter. Maybe it won't be this way in heaven. You will at last have the spirit of youth and the wisdom of age. Okay, I look at this heaven and I think, hey, that sounds pretty good. That doesn't sound boring to me. And in particular, my point here is not chiefly about me. It's about Anne Frank. It's about Otto Frank. When I think about the world's worst sufferers, people who didn't even have a chance, people who lived lives that are decisive and unmitigated tragedies, to think that that can be chapter one of a great saga that is on the whole exceedingly good for them. I think this heaven offers them that prospect. And if you care about other people, that means willing the good for them. That is to say, willing the good that might be. If this good might be, does not our love for others require us to will this good on their behalf? that is to say, to hope that it is true. I'm suggesting here that something like solidarity with fellow sufferers demands, or at least gives us exceedingly weighty reasons to hope that something like this heaven can be theirs and ours together. But that's only true if there are no strong reasons against hoping in heaven. Are there? Well, there's actually a lot to think about here. So I want to work our way down the list. What reasons might you have for saying, okay, Ballard, that sounds well and good, but I have this reason for thinking heaven wouldn't be so good, or we shouldn't hope in heaven? I want to share with you 9 reasons that I think are maybe the most important. And I doubt that I will get to all reasons that anyone could think of. That's what Q&A is for. Okay, one thing you might say is we shouldn't follow this hope in heaven because it's blatant wishful thinking. This man is appealing to blatant wishful thinking. I'm doing no such thing. Wishful thinking is believing something because you want it to be true. Am I telling you to believe that there's a heaven? No. I'm recommending hoping that there's a heaven, and clearly hope is compatible with grave doubts about the hoped-for prospect. We hope for things that are uncertain all the time. That is the stuff of human life. All right, you might think, okay, but it is too unlikely. You can't hope for really unlikely things. I mean, at some point, if you just know it's not going to happen, then it doesn't make sense to hope. Okay, notice what you must be claiming to advance this objection. You're claiming not only that the odds of theism are low, but that they're so low, it's a negligible prospect. Okay, because after all, if a God exists, there being some afterlife like the one I just described seems sufficiently plausible. So the real question is just, does a God exist? You're telling me that you know with great certainty God doesn't exist. I have to admit, I find this puzzling. I mean, theism, after all, has a lot of theoretical advantages. It gives you a story about the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning of the physical constants for life, gives you a story about the harmony of the mental and the physical, gives you a number of accounts about the basis of human dignity and environmental values. Granted, theism has problems as well, like the problem of evil, such as the evils we have just been discussing. And yet, most contemporary defenders of the problem of evil think that evil is only some evidence against theism. Few people today think that evil somehow decisively rules out the existence of God. They think it just lowers the odds of theism. And I can just grant you that. I can grant you even that on balance, theism has at most, say, a 20% chance of being true. That does not put it beyond the pale of being hope-worthy. So you got to tell me that you've combed through the evidence and you know, weighing all that evidence, that theism is decisively ruled out. If you have done that, I just would like to be the first to congratulate you on this momentous achievement, and I look forward to seeing the results in print. Okay, someone might also complain that heaven is too distracting. If we hope for heaven, we're going to be distracted from the important things we need to do here on earth. We got to solve problems for ourselves, not dream about pie in the sky. All right, notice that this is an empirical claim. You are claiming a prediction that if I take up this hope, it's going to have a certain kind of impact on my motivations towards doing good. Is that true? We're at least owed some empirical evidence, if that's what you think. What evidence there is seems to point in the opposite direction. Over and over again, we find a robust link, for example, between religiosity and charitable giving. That's not to mention the innumerable episodes in the history of medicine, science, and human rights. For example, abolition. Who started the abolition movement, the greatest human rights achievement in the history of humanity? That would be the Quakers, pious believers in God and an afterlife. I'm not offering here some triumphalist apologetic where the church always does right. I shall join you in a full-throated denunciation of the church's sins. But notice that even there, our complaint is not that the church has been too disengaged from the world's affairs. Some have suggested that the hope of heaven is cowardly. This is a wonderful book, by the way. The philosopher Jonathan Lear voices but does not endorse this objection. He says, we use the term Pollyanna pejoratively to designate someone whose hopefulness depends on averting her gaze from devastating reality. Indeed, we sometimes suspect that a person's hopefulness is a strategy for averting her gaze. Okay, so I want to say, yeah, that could be sometimes. Is that what's happening here? I don't think so. Notice how we began this talk, by looking evil right in the eyes. The hope I'm advancing, the hope of heaven, precisely presents itself as most urgent when we do not avert our gaze from evil. So I don't think this applies to the kind of hope that I'm talking about. Some complain, not about heaven, but just about the idea of a God at all, that this would be limiting to our autonomy. So the Oxford philosopher Guy Kahane writes, if a striving for independence, understanding, privacy, and solitude is so inextricably woven into my identity that its curtailment by God's existence would not merely make my life go worse, but rob it of meaning, then perhaps I can reasonably prefer that God not exist. Reasonably treat God's existence as undesirable. Okay, Kahane's thought here is some people don't know there's a God, right? They don't believe in God. And so they undertake certain life projects, like striving to be as autonomous as they can be. And suppose it turns out, actually, lo and behold, there is a God. Your striving for autonomy was futile. You've structured your life around a futile pursuit. Doesn't it make sense for them to prefer a world where there isn't any God? Okay, maybe, but to think about this, we have to put all the relevant things on the table. So, let's consider world one. In this world, you have more autonomy. Kahane is happy about that. But in this world, everyone stays dead and history is a slaughter bench. How about world two? People who love their autonomy get a bit less of their autonomy, but every single person is redeemed. Okay, which world should you prefer to have? I don't even think Kahane, the choice is put in this way, would vote for world one. I think, again, that solidarity with sufferers requires us to prefer world two. That's not even to say that if you're a universalist theism, notice that even if you structure your life right now around a futile pursuit because you don't know there's a God, this is just chapter one. You get to discover that there's a God and then adjust how you structure your life. So it's not going to be the case on universalist theism that anyone, out of ignorance of God's existence, has wasted their lives. Indeed, everyone gets a life that is exceedingly meaningful, and they get to learn the whole story about what the world is like so that they can adjust their lives accordingly. Okay, there's more to say about Kahane. If you want to open that up, I'm happy to do that in the Q&A. His paper is a rich and subtle one, and so I don't pretend to have settled the matter here, but consider those the beginning of the conversation. Okay. 6, some have thought that hoping in a heaven, if there were a heaven, it would be trivializing for our lives now and for our projects now and our various meaning-making pursuits. Okay, so here's Steven Pinker, for example. Pinker writes, belief in an afterlife implies that health and happiness are not such a big deal, because life on earth is an infinitesimal portion of one's existence. I just think there's got to be more to it than this. It can't just be that your life is an infinitesimal part of your existence. I mean, do you want to be tortured for 5 minutes? But it's such a small part of your overall life. I mean, I don't care how long I live. I don't want to be tortured for any amount of time. So I just think there has to be more to it than this. Let's try Todd May, a philosopher who thinks a great deal about death. And he thinks death actually adds meaning to life because if we live forever, this would lower the bar for our commitments. It's like, it's like learning that you have 10 years to finish a project rather than just 2 weeks. It's like, there's a certain kind of bracing urgency to a deadline, right? So death is like the greatest deadline of them all. That's the thought here. Okay. Or as another philosopher put it, you only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. An uncanny resemblance? Decide for yourselves. Okay. I just want to think for a minute about risk aversion with you. What's being suggested here is that heaven undermines meaning-making because it actually takes away a certain kind of riskiness from life, the risk that you might miss your one shot. Risk aversion is one of these traits that we can permissibly vary on, right? It's like you might be a lot more like, I have no interest in doing this. You might, it's like power to you. It's a bit like jazz. It's like some people like it, some people don't. You don't have to be into it, but I get it. There's probably something there to like. I think risk aversion is like that, perhaps within certain bounds. So you might prefer a world that has death as a deadline and therefore a bracing sense of urgency. You only have so much time. Other people might prefer a world that's more like a day at the beach, like you just have all eternity to get this thing done. All right. So now, with the preferential character of risk aversion in view, we got to do the two worlds test again. Okay, so world one, more urgency and risk, but history is a slaughter bench. Anne Frank stays dead, and so on and so on. World two, less urgency and risk. Every single person is redeemed. Which world should you want to be true? Doesn't seem so good if you pick world one, does it? And I think even Todd May would, again, if the choice is put in these terms, would agree. World two is the preferable one. You should be willing to sacrifice a bit of the risk and urgency that you happen to prefer if it means that every single person gets to be redeemed. Okay. Some have complained that the heaven we're promised is actually not the reunion we want. So here's Philip Kitcher. He writes, parents who have lost their children, lovers who mourn the beloved, people who miss a close friend, want a continuation of the here and now, not a meeting under very different, dimly imaginable conditions in which two strangers whose lives are no longer connected confront one another. The hole in life's fabric demands immediate repair. Okay. I would contest the claim that it's dimly imaginable. I'm inviting you to consider an Earth that is a lot like this one, an embodied existence that's a lot like this one, meeting your loved ones in a similar condition to which you left them. It's going to be a lot of qualifications and exceptions to that, but in general. But I think the real problem here is this. Kitcher is inviting us to make the wrong comparison, okay? This is the actual comparison we have to make. Option 1, in some distant time, you are reunited with your lost loved one. You cultivate a close relationship, one formed under very different circumstances, granted, but one in which you come to love each other even more deeply than before. And then option 2 is you never see them again. Those are the actual options we're comparing here, okay? And I mean, clearly, if you've lost someone you love, option 1 is infinitely to be preferred than option 2. All right. There are 9 things. We're on number 8. The most famous objection at all is that eventually doing anything forever would grow tedious. This is a big topic. This objection could have been the topic of an entire lecture itself. But I'd be remiss not to say anything about it. It's made famous by a great moral philosopher, Bernard Williams. So here's what I basically want to say about this. You know, I went to the Grand Canyon, and I sat for an hour gazing at this beautiful canyon. And I watched tourist after tourist come up, take their little picture, and leave, and that was it. And boy, did I judge them. Because here I am, so deep. I can look at this thing for way longer. But then after an hour, I too got tired and had to go to the bathroom or do something else. I wanted a coffee, blah, blah, blah. So is it because the Grand Canyon got objectively less interesting? The answer to that is a resounding no. Can't you see that there are so many things in life that are profoundly interesting, but our ability to attend to them, to give them the attention, the love, the appreciation they deserve is finite. We're like cracked, leaky vessels, incapable of holding all that beauty. It's like a day at the beach. You prepare, and you get there, and 2 hours later, you're uncomfortable and you want to leave. The problem is not with the beach. The problem's with us. We're like spending time with old friends, It's like it just gets old after a while, even if they're your best friend. Okay, G.K. Chesterton makes the point for us. He writes, because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again, and the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony, but perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never got tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy, for we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. My suggestion is that in heaven, we might become young again. We might have our capacities for enjoyment enhanced, our capacities for attentive appreciation deepened and widened and heightened, improved in every way we could imagine. As Emily puts it at the end of Our Town, "O Earth, you're too wonderful for anybody to realize you. Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it, every minute?" I want to say, maybe that will be true when heaven comes to Earth. Shelley Kagan advances this tedium objection, and he thinks it'd be like we'd have to have a lobotomy or something in order to enjoy something forever. It's like we'd have to become like rats who just pull the lever and get a little hit of sugar or something like that. But I'm suggesting here not a diminution of our capacities, but the opposite, an enhancement of our capacities. It is not because our capacities are too large that we have to leave the Grand Canyon after an hour. All right. Again, there's a lot more to say about that objection, but that's at least one kind of response I would want to develop. Okay. Here's the last reason you might resist. The hope of the theist's heaven. This is a fun one. You think it's no better than reincarnation. All right, now, it would be a shame to say nothing about this, but I have to say reincarnation is central to some ancient and venerable religious traditions. I don't pretend we could do justice to this here. But again, it'd be a shame to say nothing about it. So if you're into reincarnation, let me tell you one thing that makes me hesitate about it, okay? And think of this as an invitation to the conversation, right? This is the beginning. I want to know what happens to reunion with lost loved ones on a reincarnation view. So think of Otto and Anne. On this view, Anne has been reincarnated perhaps dozens of times since then. Maybe even so has Otto. I mean, what is this going to happen for 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, reincarnated in different forms? What will their reunion look like when that finally happens? I mean, what happened to the man, Otto, who wanted to hold his 15-year-old girl again? It sounds like that's not going to happen. I mean, that would just be arbitrary if just this one form they happen to take at this phase, they get to have that form again. Is that the thought? Kitcher complained that the theist's heaven was dimly imaginable. I claim that's not so, but I think that objection does apply here. This reunion is dimly imaginable. Or at least if you're interested in reincarnation, tell me how you think about the reunion with lost loved ones in a way that should fill us with hope. That's what I want to hear. That's my challenge to you. All right. I don't think any of these objections succeed. I think the theist's hope of an embodied heaven is worth wanting indeed. The modest claim is plausible. On balance, hoping in universalist theism is at least permissible. You can be gripped by this and still be someone who is morally and intellectually respectable. And I would even add a bit of immodesty, that it's not only permissible, but positively admirable, particularly if you hope in solidarity with your fellow sufferers. How do we get from hope to faith? This is the interesting upshot of all of this. Just as there are many philosophers who think about hope today, there are many who think about faith as well. And just about almost everyone working on this topic thinks, like hope, faith does not require confident belief in the faith object. So our own Lara Buchak has a view like this. Jonathan Quanvig, Dan's Howard Snyder, and McCoyne have a view like this. And this paper, by the way, The Fellowship of the Ninth Hour, if you want an introduction to this way of thinking about faith, this is probably the best introduction. It's a great place to start. And pretty much on all of these accounts of faith, it's going to be the case that if you take up the hope of God, and then you add that you structure your life around that hope in various ways, you will count as a person of faith. So what that might look like is this. You say, I am gripped by this hope of universalist theism. I'm going to go to a mosque or a church or a temple, find some group of like-minded hopers, and lock arms with them, practice the liturgy, and seek to live in light of this hope. That would count as a pattern of religious life in which you can, if you are a doubter, retain full intellectual integrity. You don't have to pretend you know something you don't. At the center of that religious life would be the hope of God in the face of evil. In The Lord of the Rings, Galadriel, Queen of the Elves, gives to Frodo on his journey to Mordor a phial full of light, a little glass bottle. In this phial, she says, is caught the light of Arundel's star set amid the waters of my fountain. It will shine still brighter when night is about you. May it be a light to you in dark places when all other lights go out. So this light grows brighter the darker the darkness. I think the hope of God in the face of evil is a bit like Galadriel's phial in this sense. The worse the evil, the more it makes sense to hope there's a God who can set it right. And if you take up that hope, therefore, it will be true what John the Evangelist said, that a light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this lecture from Brian, then I think you'll also like my interview with him where we talk about how faith without perks is dead.